Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Marissa. I'm so looking forward to sharing this work with you today. Thank you so very much to Chris and Hayon for including me in this series and within this ongoing conversation. I'm so honored. And I know if any of my students and colleagues are here today, they've heard about and seen these talks and about the incredible resource that they provide to our field. So I'm even more excited to be here. I do first want to express my gratitude to the many young children with whom I have worked as a collaborator and researcher during the past 20 years. It has been such a pleasure to be in relationship with each of you. Your voices, ideas, and cultural productions have deeply shaped the work that I will share today. Thank you. I would next like to thank the broad, fierce, and deeply engaged band of mother scholars who propel and energize this work. Our network is my literal lifeline. As a caregiver, educator, and researcher, you all know who you are. Thank you. And finally, many of the images within the slides that I share today were created in collaboration with my own 3 young children, Robert, Stella, and Luca, during our work together as a part of Pittsburgh-based artist Lenka Clayton's artist residency in motherhood, which we began in 2020. And that's one of the images you see here of a series of nests made by Robert in our studio space. I chose to frame my presentation today with the concept of transformative mother scholarship, which I would first like to contextualize. The title of the talk, as Dr. Schulte shared, also reflects a forthcoming anthology that I am co-editing with my long-term colleagues from the University of Arizona, Dr. Shana Cinquamani, Dr. Georgina Bodoni, and Dr. Elizabeth Garber. I'd love to answer more questions about the book during the Q&A portion of the talk, but much of who a mother scholar is and what a mother scholar does is always in process and sits within discomfort. Following Cheryl Matthias, whose work was introduced to me by Dr. Tina Thompson, I see mother scholar as a fused identity of a mother who draws from their practice of mothering to inform their art and scholarship, and from their scholarship to inform how they mother. I propose that the fused identity of mother scholar reconceptualizes feminist approaches to childhood research as it uncovers formally invisibilized public pedagogies of childhood. I wish to emphasize that a mother scholar is an inclusive category that is neither dependent upon a person's gender or sexuality, nor being a birthing person. Rather, following Chelsea Conaboy, who writes about the mother brain, a quote, "Mother brain is not synonymous with the female brain nor with the birthing brain. Rather, it is the brain earned by care, as feminist philosopher Sarah Ruddock might have described it. It is the one engaged in the life-supporting practice of mothering, which is older than feminism, as Alexis Pauline Gumbs wrote in Revolutionary Mothering. The capacity for that kind of connection is a fundamental characteristic of our species." Conaboy continues to describe mothering as a phase not unlike childhood, in which there occurs major neural reorganization in the forming of new adaptive skills. From a post-developmental perspective, this organization is permanent and ongoing, shared in the interaction between adults and children. In this way, mother scholarship is a duality that is greater than a discrete separation between adult, child, or children. As a permanent and immutable identity informed by complex interactions, mother scholarship is not a static practice, but a continual shared choreography of interaction between mothers and their children and the worlds that they inhabit and co-produce. Not a look at childhood research as outside of us, but literally within our bodies and our minds, our inner worlds and the more than human worlds that surround and compose us. In this way, the project of transformative mother scholarship is inclusive and political. As Audre Lorde called us to do in 1979, quote, "In a world of possibility for us all, our personal visions help lay the groundwork for political action," end quote. This making visible of the often privatized and invisibilized world of care work then contributes to a revolution in which children's identities are publicly validated, an antidote to the invisibility of young children and of care that contribute to the ongoing and endemic marginalization of young children. This marginalization interacts with childism, with ableism, with racism, and with other hiding forces that result in an amplified marginalization of historically vulnerable populations of children and their caregivers. Examples of this include the infantilization of disabled children and adults, or the adultification of children of color, both of which are forms of dehumanization. So following the conjoining of mother and scholar, there is a conjoining of the political project to not only make visible young children, but also caregivers. And this extends beyond the mothering relationship, the many forms of care which are invisibilized, particularly in contemporary American society. In my own personal project, this work reveals and interrogates my complicity in the hiding of care work as a mother scholar. For example, one of the primary features of my parenting experience has been a lack of childcare. At first, I took on the burden of continuing to hide by assuming this societal failure as a personal one. I couldn't find childcare because I wasn't trying hard enough. Rather than calling out loud that childcare as a part of social and cultural infrastructure was inaccessible to me, even as a privileged white woman who works in a leadership role in the field. Rather than leave my young children in an unsafe situation to uphold the hiding of care work and the artificial separation of home and work, I chose to uncover myself. I write about this more in depth in a piece in which I reconsider the implications of making myself visible as a caregiver by contrasting the concept of a hidden mother with Jane Osgood's proposal of a mutated modest witness. For me, this has meant taking my children with me to work on many occasions and inviting their presence into institutional and cultural spaces where it is often unexpected, unsupported, and unwelcome. My own challenge in this is to sit within discomfort where I am neither a pristine scholar nor a perfect mother, and to assert space and visibility for myself and my children. I mobilize the idea of hidden mothering as a dual practice in which an artist mother scholar is not only hidden, but complicit in her hiding. This is in direct contrast to mutated modest witnessing, which is a practice of disclosure and of lingering in the unknowing and unknowable. It is the opposite of masculine modesty and masculine objectivity, in which access to knowledge was restricted by class, race, and gender and the boundaries of scientific theater. Victorian-era modest witnessing and hidden mother images might be seen as cultural cognates. Osgood applies Donna Haraway's figure of the mutated modest witness as a practical guide for researching with young children differently in her work in a multicultural nursery. She explains, quote, "The mutated modest witness is not an innocent bystander gathering representational accounts of the world out there. Rather, she is implicated and invested," end quote. She describes early childhood context as extraordinarily ordinary, excessive, and effectively charged. So that is the structure that I have built that intersects with my experiences as an educator and researcher who works with young children and with their art. My experience as a bilingual elementary reading and art educator and a Montessori prepared and Red Joe inspired preschool educator underpin my commitment to reconceptualize images of young children by co-producing and exhibiting multimedia and multiliterate counter-narratives through visual, literary, and performance art. I'm especially interested in art's value to contradict images of the vulnerable populations of young children with whom I have worked, including English language learners along the US-Mexico border and on the indigenous nations in southern Arizona, children who were refugees, children experiencing homelessness, and children with disabilities. And so now I want to return to how all of this interacts with sensing children's art differently and with intentional public and community-based work. I plan to share 2 projects today with you that sit at the intersection of these cusps. The first is called Drawing as Felt, and it appeared in the anthology New Images of Thought in the Study of Childhood Drawing, edited by Dr. Schulte and Dr. Laura Traffy-Pratt. Drawing as Felt forms the foundation for my current collaborative work with Robert, Stella, and Luca. Recomposing a Mother Brain Collective, which will appear in the anthology that shares the title of this talk. So I will describe the intimate connection that I see between felt and the mother brain. And these are some images from our time together and our work in collaboration. So this is a frozen lake beach. I don't know if you can see, this is some treasure that Stella found in the woods behind our home, the Rolling Rock can, and then different ways in which we draw with our bodies and with the earth, which I will discuss more. And I'm happy to answer questions about at the end because I know it's a lot of images. So it has often felt risky for me to share this work because typically in an academic context, I've acutely perceived a pressure to perform an artificial estrangement between the personal and the professional. And that's something that I've always struggled with, even as an educator, and as a parent now as well. My experience parenting has augmented this felting as it has magnified an intense feeling of loneliness for me. The COVID-19 pandemic was a reverberating rupture in which many were suddenly in this shared in-between space. I see a relationship in this infolding of work and home to how children are intentionally separated from adult society. With these spaces in mind, Robert, Stella, and Luca and I began in artist Lanka Clayton's Artist Residency in Motherhood, ARIM, in 2020. ARIM is a call for mother artists across the world to explore the practice of art residency in their own homes around daily routines of care and shared forms of existence with children. It reconceptualizes motherhood as a place of explorative and speculative work around mothering conditions in an evolving complex of mother-child relations. We began the Artist in Residency in Motherhood using Lanka's open source DIY residency kit and named our shared studio space Hop Studio. That was short for hopscotch, but we didn't have enough letters for our sign. In embracing the impossibility of mastery and the constant disruption of knowledge that mothering experiences convey, I am also reflecting on what Tina Thompson describes as an ethics of resistance towards single stories about childhood and adults that do not account for the situatedness of their lives in entanglements with the material world. Luca's birth coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic, so I moved from the hospital to quarantine with a newly 4-year-old, 2-year-old, newborn, and a full academic teaching load. What the process of the artist residency and motherhood bore for me, along with the pandemic, was the re-exposure of early childhood education and care as critical cultural infrastructures. And now there is a whole cultural movement toward radical action unfolding with mother activists that has had tremendous impacts on early education. Our Hop Studio residency critically interrogates and suggests antidotes for complicities and hidden systems, including my participation in the hiding of caregiving work, which renders the crucial need for early education invisible and calls into question normative and discrete separations of parenting, educating, and caregiving roles. And I'll try to move this around. So these are some examples. This is our actual Hop Studio site. But as you'll see throughout the talk, we didn't spend a ton of time in the actual Hop Studio site. Much of our time was spent outdoors or in the areas that surround us. So this is actually some work that was done in our yard. This is the outside of Hop Studio. So this is like the door to Hop Studio. And so the excessiveness that Osgood describes is what was characteristic of our experience in Hop Studio. So Hop Studio is maybe more like a concept and a place than just an actual place. So this connects to what I shared earlier and a reconceptualization of what young children's drawings are and how we know them. With inspiration from curriculum scholar Stephanie Springay, who focuses on queer, feminist, anti-racist pedagogies and proposes writing as felt, I propose an ontological turn in which rather than knowing children's drawings, we sense them and resensitize ourselves with them. As Lisa Barrister notes, a mother may be a subject of many interruptions. who struggles to know because knowledge is associated with a self-contained individual who carries a cohesive linear narrative. However, she argues that in maternal encounters, the mother emerges, quote, not only as a subject of interruption, encumbered, viscous, impeded, but also resensitized to sound, smell, emotions, sentient awareness, language, and love, end quote. Following this, the question that I pose to guide the thinking of drawing as felt is, how do children's drawings resensitize and recalibrate our adult bodies to sense more, to sense differently, and to attune ourselves to the creative forces of life participating in children's drawings? Wet felting was one of the first fiber art processes that I learned as a child. Tangles of freshly shorn lamb's wool catch my fingernails as I card. Tiny sticks and shards of grass embedded in the fibers scratch my water-wrinkled fingers. Sticky, shiny, smooth lanolin waxes my palms. The gamey aroma of warm, wet wool infuses my cells. Unlike weaving or sewing, felting cannot be undone. As Springay notes, felt is, quote, force and movement with no warp and no weft. It spreads out infinitely. It cannot be undone, and the fibers return to their original state, end quote. It is like the earning of a mother brain, an irreversible transformation. Felt speaks to the worldliness of touch and how through touch bodies reach toward the world, encouraging us to think of the body as more than a closed organism, but as sensing and responsive in continuous encounters. Drawing as felt is constituted by speculative middles that make it impossible to know what a drawing is or does ahead of the encounter. That drawings cannot be known in advance and can only be approached from within events brings us back to the possibility of thinking of drawings as sensuous events in which we not only draw, but we are formed as new bodies and brains as a result of the encounter. And these are some examples of our drawing with the environment that surrounded us during our HOP studio residency. On the birding trail, we spent a lot of this time birding on the lake beach, walking through the parks and trails that surrounded where we live. Let's see this here so you can see some of the video of the same events. I always have a hard time advancing the slides when I have a video in them. Robert, Stella, and Luca rarely draw on the paper available to them in copious forms in HOP Studio. Their early drawings are made on by mud, sand, snow, leaves, soap bubbles, light, pixels, and frosting. Their drawings feel and felt in the sense that they are sensuous and responsive to worldly encounters. What disability culture activist, performance artist, and choreographer Petra Kuppers describes as material alchemies. In her account of dancing with a Michigan beach, she reflects, quote, my feet sink into the ruins of sea creatures and the debris of mountains. Tiny skeletons cushion my fall. They pour through my fingers, reminding me of other than human perspectives on what is past and what is passing. I am implicated in these sand ruins, and they come skin close. Dance brings me experientially into a different relation with environmental materiality. It beckons, let's merge, end quote. I've experienced many reverberations of these drawing events at home and at the places we go. Every time I think about how these drawings escape the frames with which educators have come to know children's drawings. In education, children's drawings have been commonly described as intentional semiotic practices commanded by the child that reveal the interiority of the child as cognition, acculturation, emotions, and skills. This lasting conviction generates and sustains the single story of childhood, to which Tina Thompson refers and suggests redrawing. Perhaps the difficulty to recognize the drawings that we do as drawings is because they cannot be cut away from the world and analyzed apart from it. And these are some examples of Robert's beach body drawings. He said, "Look at me, I'm making drawings with my body on the lake beach that we frequently visited, the same one that was frozen." So we visited many of these places and still do year round, and note how the process of change is the most consistent sort of natural process. These are documentation photos that Robert and Stella made of a snow nest that they built, a number of snow nests over a course of one winter. And we're very interested in not only the construction of the nests themselves, but how the nests change over time, the melting, the refreezing, all of those sorts of things. And the ontological turn of sensing rather than knowing children's drawings, I recognize the slow space-time of mothering as one that allows the valorization of these drawings, not for what they are or for what they mean, but for how they entangle and build connections with the world. What is especially important is that Robert, Stella, and Luca draw with a genuine curiosity for the others who they are responding to. That is the mud, sand, snow, leaves, soap bubbles, light, pixels, and frosting. They, quote, hold open the possibility that surprises are in store, that something interesting is about to happen, but only if one cultivates the virtue of letting those one visits interactively shape what occurs. And that's a quote from Donna Haraway. Experiencing the openness of wild encounters in drawing makes me hold loosely the ontologies and epistemologies that we project into children's drawings. I strive to attune and feel the singularities and becomings in each drawing event and the unknown adventures that they can open up. And I have so many images, so I'm really happy to talk about more and share. One thing that this way of working really yields is just a lot of documentation of experiences as well. So in sort of switching gears a little bit with this then, as an early educator, I have always been keenly intrigued by what this transformed thinking can do. So this is where that work that is more personal, even though I've made it public, intersects with my community-based work in activism. I founded Squad in 2017 for a number of reasons, some of which were to create a space where I could be with children in the way that I wanted to, and to support and share this with others, including pre-service educators who I consider caregivers, and caregivers within the rural community in which I lived. I had not before seen this approach modeled. Our shared work in Squad draws on the theorization of the post-human child and feminist new materialism as levers to centralize difference. Through guided experience that allow caregivers to initiate long-term relationships with children so that the global normalized image of the typical child of the single story of childhood, who is invariably white, male, heterosexual, and able-bodied, can be replaced by images of many children in relationship. In this research, I have found that normalized images of children in childhoods tend to serve as placeholders for caregivers rather than responsive relationships. This work then forms a foundation that intersects with feminist new materialist ways of thinking about young children's encounters with materials and about the identities and hierarchies of materials themselves. In educational spaces, young children are often offered impoverished materials. So thinking more broadly about material identities produces counter stories in which all materials interact in ways unbounded by discipline. This is how what is typically thought of as an art process, such as drawing, can be instead viewed as felt. And in this way, we can consider how children's drawing exists not just on a page, but in a number of intense interior and exterior relationships. So these are two collaborative projects in Squad. On the left, It's a Trap, was a series of skate park obstacles and events created and choreographed by children and placed in two public skate parks over the course of 3 months, where they were moved, manipulated, broken, repaired, skated, recorded by people in the community. So these were created from recycled materials and proposed and installed in these spaces as a kind of site-specific choreography of art and movement and lines of flight. And there's a link, I can share the slides to a short documentary video produced by my partner, Bob Sweeny, on the It's a Trap series of installations. The image on the right is a collaborative dwelling that children created in the squad space, which is in a community-based art gallery and a space shared with the public and with artists and residents. So in this project, it was continuously altered, it's still actually being continuously altered by people in the community and artists and residents in the community. So in this way, the children's work is kind of melting into the community and changing it. And these are some more examples. In Squad, something that we contemplate is how we might slow ourselves to this presence and this imminence. We consider how it impacts our smaller interactions with young children and with materials, because it is in these excessively effective, ordinary interactions that relationships are built and nurtured, and where caregivers learn to become responsive and are transformed. This is the earning of the mother brain and the building of the mother brain collective. This is the private pedagogy of responsiveness, of presence, and of witness made public. So these are just some more examples. I have so many from the Squad. On the left, she's making potions from different materials that were found. And on the right, children and their caregivers are engaged in making portraits, working on the floor. You know, we work in all sorts of different ways in the space. And I thought that I might conclude by sharing two current projects. The first is a poetic essay that traces the continual and interactive processes of recomposing a mother brain. In this work, I propose that mother scholarship has profound implications for an ontological shift in feminist approaches to childhood research, as it relies upon a perspective that a mother scholar is a fused identity, which is both formed by and in continual relationship with children. The typical ontological relationship between adult-child is dismantled by mother scholarship, which supplants a power imbalance between child-adult, as it demands fusion between caregiver and children. So these are some images from that poetic piece that the kids and I are writing together for the anthology that I mentioned. I'm also looking at conceptualizing a fourth pedagogical site, which is based on Dr. Brett Wilson's 3 pedagogical sites and third site pedagogy. The fourth site hovers within the post-digital and post-human, and thinking about how children's digital productions, I showed a lot of natural encounters, but I am not creating a hierarchy and this work between the natural and the digital, and actually looking at the digital from a post-digital framework. So these are all digital productions made in Hop Studio. The first are photographs that Robert made of deer tracks in the woods behind our home. In the middle, one of many series of staged and edited photos that Luca and Stella have created of one another, in which they're engaged in different types of scenarios, and then they re-edit and revisit those photos. And this is actually a short video that Stella created for YouTube as a YouTuber, even though she doesn't have a YouTube account, and the kinds of experimentations that she makes with videos, typically with Luca.
Hey guys, it's me, Stella. Today's video, I have my little brother again. His second time, but first.
I have lots more videos to share. One of the things that they're really interested in experimenting with is the slow motion feature on the iPhone, and taking videos both in time lapse and in slow motion. And that's actually a clip from it's like 25 minutes of that. So I asked which clip I could share today, and that's the one that made the cut. But there's lots of slow motion videos from our experiences birding as well. So I'm really looking at the ways, kind of the artificial separation as well between analog and digital production, and how that impacts the ways in which we think about children's drawings. So thank you so much. I know this is such a brief interview of much larger bodies of work. I am super happy to answer your questions and to provide any additional information. You're also so welcome to contact me at any time with any questions that you might have, and I'm very happy to share. Thank you all so much.